Hey everyone, thank you for tuning into my channel. This is Zack. Glad to be back. And remember, my Cash App is listed below. If you like my channel, like my content, do me a favor and subscribe, hit the subscribe button and leave me a comment. Today I'm gonna kind of talk to you guys about my first wife and first son, Richard. I'm gonna tell you how I met them, and I don't know if anyone knows from hearing my life story from over at Matt's True Crime channel, but they passed away. Like, my son passed away when he was 5 years old. Well, they were killed in a car accident when he was 5 years old, and I was 26 when that happened. Going to college, probably like 2.5 years in. Just kind of give you a background about that. That was a very traumatic time in my life. It's not something I like to reiterate because it's still kind of emotional to me, but just want to share that part of it. It kind of what led to like some of the hard portions of my life. I feel like it guided me into some of the things I ended up doing. At least that was some of the advice I got from people who know me and know my story. They kind of told me that might have been the trigger that led me down the wrong path. Because prior to that, I was upstanding, hardworking citizen. As a matter of fact, I used to have 2 jobs at all times. This happened, of course, I met her when I got to college. So graduating from high school, once I was done, I took a complete year off because I had a partial football scholarship, but I didn't have the funds or the money coming from my family who wasn't that well off to pay for the other part of my schooling. So I did a submission request with I got a partial scholarship to the University of Texas. I did a submission request to ask if I could have postpone it a year in order to get some of my finances together. And during that year I spent off, because I spent it in my hometown of Tampa, I was working 3 jobs. I was working at a Burger King. I was also working at a telemarketing center for a uniform rental company, which was a great job. I actually made a lot of money working there. And the third job was just kind of janitorial. On the weekends, I used to help my mom, who went into different buildings and did the floor. So I was her buffer at like 18, 19 years old. I was the guy that ran the buffer. So going into my first telemarketing job was at the company UniFirst, and I was calling up for sales reps to go out to different companies that needed uniform rental, like mechanic shops where the mechanics get their own clothes dirty. Well, they use a uniform rental company that actually washes and cleans their clothes every week, so they don't have to put all those greasy clothes into their own washing machines. They also did what they call shop rags for wiping your hand and wiping all the oil and stuff up. So I worked for them for about a year. I think it was about 11 months I worked for them. I made a lot of money because I was pretty good at it. I found that calling people on the phone and trying to sell them something actually was kind of a fun thing to do. It's what brought me out of my shell and probably made me a little more professional. It changed the way I talk because I'm talking on the phone with businessmen. I was calling from a business to a business, asking if they wanted uniform service. So it kind of changed my demeanor and demure, the way I talk. It also kind of got me familiar with the corporate world because this was a large corporation out of Massachusetts, UniFirst. They were out of Massachusetts, and the telemarketing office they had in Tampa was new when I went to work for them. So the owner of the company came down a couple of times when they first opened. I got to talk to him and meet him. He kind of liked me because of my personality, and I was joking around. And when they had sales meetings, he'd ask me to start off the meeting with a joke just because I started off, because he kind of liked me. It was kind of fun. So after working a year, 3 jobs and saving my money, I thought I had enough to live in Texas. So because the University of Texas is out of Austin, Texas, which even back in the late 80s was an expensive place to live. I ended up starting off having to live in South San Antonio, Texas, where I found an efficiency apartment for $250 a month. Believe it or not. Nice and kind of, I thought it was nice. It was in a bad neighborhood, kind of a tougher neighborhood, but it was a brand new apartment complex, and the apartment only ran me $250. I had to drive 48, 50 miles to get to school, but it worked. So I would make that drive to Austin to go to school during the day. Then I took another job at Burger King, which was kind of on the way home, right off of Highway 35 out from San Antonio. I worked there until about 11 o'clock at night, where I would drive the rest of the way home, sleep, and then go back. Now, I was doing this for a while during the school year because I played ball. That's all I did. I went to school, played football, and worked my job. But quickly, the money that I had saved up just to get to college got depleted. Just main living and paying for school, my partial scholarship at school. So when the summer came, I wanted to take more classes, but I actually couldn't do that because I didn't have the money. I told myself I need to take on another job in order to help me support myself for the following year. So a brand new company had just shown up in San Antonio, Texas, called West Telemarketing Company. They had just moved in. Matter of fact, when they were advertising everywhere. If you got a newspaper, they had almost a whole page ad looking for qualified telemarketers. Now, new companies, when they're trying to hire salesmen or telemarketers, they go overboard being professional. Now, West Telemarketing was a telemarketing inbound call company out of Omaha, Nebraska. Like, they were a company that you would hire if you wanted people to answer phone calls on your 1-800 numbers. This is back in the late 80s, early 90s, where 1-800 numbers and 1-700 or 1-500 number, whatever those numbers were that they charge you money, 1-900 numbers. So it was 1-900 numbers, 1-800 numbers, any information you wanted. West Telemarketing would be the people who would initially talk to you if you called an 800 number before they placed it through to whatever company, or they would take in those calls or those sales for them. Well, they wanted to start an outbound telephone company, brand new. So I answered the ad. It was very professional. When you went in, you had the introduction interview, the first initial one. Then you had the follow-up interview. Then you had the interview with a team leader and the people you'd be working with. I mean, it was like a 5-stage process in order to get the job. And I went through all 5 stages. Well, seeing how I had done a little telemarketing myself in the past, it was very natural. Of course, I wowed them at the beginning, coming in, making jokes, telling them I'm interested. I'm a college student. I'm 19 years old, I think I was 19 at the time. I'm ready to get started. Let's go. So I got the job as a telemarketer. I started off working. So West Telemarketing had various companies that they were making outbound calls for. Their first customer in the primary company was Sears Siding. I don't know if you're familiar at all with Sears Siding. Sears Siding is the siding that people put on their homes if they don't want to paint it. It's like vinyl, Sears vinyl siding. We were calling people up, homeowners, and asking them if they'd be interested in getting a free estimate on Sears Siding. They had Sears Siding and they had Sears cabinet refacing. Those were our first main customers. Now later on, they picked up better customers, like they had Fingerhut. We were calling older people, asking them if they wanted to order certain items or promotional items from Fingerhut. They had AT&T long distance, where we were calling and asking people to switch their long distance company. I mean, it was an awesome start. West went all out. They were the first company to have one of the first companies to have predictive dialers, which means that I didn't actually pick up a phone and dial it like I did at my job at UniFirst. I actually put on a set of headphones, plugged in, and the computer dialed the number, and when the person answered, they'd shoot the number through. If it was an answer machine, I'd have to hit like F9, yes, and disconnect the call. But if someone answered, normally when the call hit me, that person's saying hello, and I say, hello, hi, this is the first company to do that. Plus, when the call came in, the dialer would send the name of the person and their address, like initial information, to my computer screen. And they would fill in that information into a built-in script right on the screen. So they'd come in, I go, hello, hi, Mrs. Jones, this is, Mr. Allen calling about Sears siding. I'd like to know, talk to the homeowner to know if you're interested in siding. Now, as you can imagine, selling Sears siding, there was a lot of rejection. And one of the ways we kind of motivated each other, and there was a lot, because it was a very fun job. A lot of young people. There was a couple of older people there that had been in sales a long time, probably in between jobs. But most of the times it was us young people from college, or like there were older people, but for the young, probably the oldest one I knew in the young age was like 28, 27 years old. So it was a different mix. So it was kind of a social event. Going to work to me was like a social event. So much so that us as the young, we thought it was hilarious when you called for Sears siding and you got cursed out. Matter of fact, whenever you procured a sale, whenever a sale was made or an appointment was about to be made, you actually had to record the person saying that, yes, I agree to have the representative come out. So not only would we record the sales, we would actually record the people who cursed us out. And before each shift, we would play those people so everyone could laugh. Because we thought it was hilarious when people would tell us, hey, Mr. Allen, you and Sears can take that siding and shove it up your ass. We were trying to get 100 of those, because our response to that, whenever as a group, when they would play that tape and they'd go, take Sears siding and shove it up your ass, everybody would yell, but Mr. Jones, it won't fit. So we all made fun of the people who'd curse us out. Or I had one guy that told me that he's not going to hang up the phone call, because we weren't allowed to hang up on any customers. They had to hang up. And he's cursing me out like, you stupid SOB, you're an idiot, you grew up an idiot, you're a loser. And he goes, I'm never going to hang this phone up. You're going to have to hang up on me. So I remember calling my boss over as I'm recording the call, and he goes, yeah, you can go ahead and hang up. I think he said enough. So I just said goodbye and hung up the phone. So it was hilarious. I don't know, it's funny to say I enjoyed it, but like we made it so much fun there. Well, there was a woman there, which is my first wife. Her name is Jacqueline Davis. Beautiful. She was Mexican and black. So she was kind of interracial. Long, black, dark, beautiful hair. She had gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, like Spanish type black and chiseled type of features. We hit it off immediately. Like she was one of those people that sat next to me a couple of times, and we talked, and we just like she used to catch rides home from various people. And so she gave me the honor one day of giving her a ride home. And that's when we really talked. We exchanged numbers, and we talk, of course, we talk on all romantic talk on the phone from the house, like long conversations in the evening time. It was awesome. So I ended up with the courage to ask her out, because generally I guess I started off as just being her friend and talking to her. So I asked her out on a date. So one of the Saturday nights we were off, we decided to go out to dinner. We went out to eat dinner. And I would say luckily or unluckily for me, our first official night eating dinner, she agreed to go back to my place. And we went back to my place and we had sex. Well, according to our mathematics of it, that was the time that she got pregnant with our son. So after knowing her for about 3 months, she advised me that she was pregnant and that she wanted to keep the baby. So I'm like, well, okay. Well, if you're going to keep the baby, I guess we should get married. So we decided to get married. And so she moved in with me into it was at the time an efficiency apartment in San Antonio. But because of both of our salaries at West Telemarketing, and I didn't even cover that part. So West Telemarketing back at that time was paying, like I want to say it was $5 an hour. I don't remember what minimum wage was. I think it's either $5 or $10 per hour plus commission. So I remember every time you'd get a Sears sighting appointment, you'd get like $4. So like I could get about 1 or 2 an hour. So I was making like $18 an hour. She would get maybe 1. So she was making, and we only worked 5-hour shifts. So you'd make like $50 a day. I'd make $60, $70 a shift. So, but with our income together, we were able to afford an apartment in Austin, Texas. It worked out because she also went to the University of Texas. I didn't even mention that part. So we moved in together right up the street from the school, and we would ride back and forth to work. We were doing so well in the summertime, we both took on seconds. I think it was close to the summer when she got pregnant. So in the summertime, we both took on 2 jobs, built up our money to where we each were able to buy a car. Well, I had to put a down payment on the car I had, the Isuzu Impulse, but the car I had owned became her car, and the Isuzu Impulse that I had was like 4 years old. That was kind of our nice car, and I got to drive that one, but we were both making payments. So we were working together and going to school at West. So what happened was, because of school, we got the second car because our schedule, and I played ball, so I wasn't able to pick her up, or the one car wasn't working for our time schedule. So that was why I need to get a second car. And what happened was, she had a class that ran pretty close to the time she had to be to work at West. And she ended up losing her job because she was late a few times at work. So when she lost her job at West Telemarketing, she like went to work at Circuit City, working at Circuit City. When they let her go, I kind of quit because I didn't like just being there and the distance that it was away from the house. So I felt like rather than going in the opposite direction from school, because West was in San Antonio, what I would do is I would get a job closer. So I went to work for a paper supply house called Pollock Paper. So, and I love that job, by the way. I was a sales rep / a customer service rep. Pollock Paper is a supply house for people to order toilet paper, soap, any supplies that a business needs to operate. That's what it was. So I had certain customers that I would call to try to generate new business, but I also called regular customers, or regular customers called me to place orders for items. And that's where I was working. So once our son was born, and I'm speeding all this up at once because this happened over the course of about 5 years, and it was a gradual effect. It wasn't all this happened at once. It happened while we were going to school. So once our son was born, we were both doing pretty good, working through our degree and getting college. We had a very good relationship. We knew that we were poor and broke. We felt like once we graduated and got our careers off, then, we dreamed of a house and more money. But starting off, we were literally broke because having a child is super expensive, especially when neither one of you have jobs that can afford you proper health care, because none of the work that we had was considered full-time. Everything was part-time, so none of us had benefits. So it became expensive. Because of the money we made, none of us qualified for government assistance. So we lived very, very poorly, like dinners of ramen noodles and hot dogs, and just certain things that we had to sacrifice to go. Gas, I'm not saying gas was high, but the amount of distance we had to travel is what made us kind of move closer to college and try to go closer to our jobs. And like I said, that's why I kind of decided to get the job at the Pollock Paper House. So at a time when my son, it was 92, when my son was 5 years old, I'm working at Pollock Paper in the office. My boss's name is Mark, who's an awesome, awesome dude. So I had a blast. I used to kid around and joke at the job all the time. Me and Mark got to where we played practical jokes on each other often. Mark was a hilarious guy because every day he would take the newspaper to the bathroom for about 40 minutes. And he goes, hey, I'm going to the bathroom. I don't want to be disturbed. And he'd be in there 40. I don't know how he did it because without his legs going to sleep. So he went to the restroom or come out and I'd make jokes or I'd knock on the door or I'd be making noises outside the door. I wouldn't say tick him off, but he would respond like, stop joking around. Take my crap serious. But anyway, so we had a pretty good relationship. So one thing about Jackie was in Austin, there was a lot of 2-lane roads. And one thing about her is she never was patient. If she got behind a slow vehicle, she automatically always wanted to overtake it and pass it. So whenever I'm riding or she's driving and I'm in the car, and we got behind someone that was slow on a 2-lane road, she'd be swerving out to see. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm not going to stay behind this car. I got to pass him. And she would, as soon as she thought the space was available, she'd pull out and overtake and pass the car. Well, that would have been the reason that she passed, because that's what she was trying to do. So apparently I'm not certain because I wasn't there. I think at the time either a car was, we were debating about which car she wanted to take. She wanted to take the Isuzu because the Isuzu Impulse was faster, and I ended up with the roll of the die, or I forgot how we challenged on who got to take the Isuzu. That was always the argument or our discussion in the morning, or we'd rotate, whatever, who got to take the piece of, I think the other one was a Chevrolet Nova, who got to take the crap and who got to take the nice car. So I had won that day, so I had the Isuzu. So apparently she was driving on a 2-lane road and she tried to overtake and pass a car that was in front of her. And coming the other direction was a truck. So she had my son in the back seat. So she believed that she could actually get in front of this car and scoot over. So I don't know if the car, because sometimes when she did that, I remember seeing the car would actually speed up. So when she tried to overtake and pass them, the person in the car, they're like, no, you're not. And they'd speed up. I don't know what happened, but she was driving and she was trying to get back in her lane to pass the car. But what happened was it was too close. And when she tried to get back in her lane, the truck coming the other way clipped the side of her car, the bumper, caused a super collision between it and the car and the other car that she was always trying to pass. And neither her nor my son survived the car wreck. Now, this hits me because they called my boss at work, or they called my job. I guess the police found out who she was, and I was the next of kin, and they called me at work. And I guess they told my boss that she was dead. So he calls me in. I usually work in the office, but I'm out in the warehouse debating something supply or checking on something to see what's up. So I remember he calls me on the intercom and he asked me to pick up the nearest phone. So I pick up the phone and he goes, where are you? What are you doing? I said, well, I'm in the warehouse arguing with blah, 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 doing whatever I was doing. He said, you need to come in my office. I need to talk to you. So the way he sounded, what's so funny is I could hear the stress in his voice that I thought I was getting fired. And I remember going to his office. He told me I needed to come in his office immediately. And I remember thinking to myself, as I'm going there, like, okay, what have I done to get fired? I've snuck in late a couple of times. I think I've left early. You know how it is when at a job, obviously I've done things to get fired. I've misappropriated a customer's order, meaning like I sent the customer the wrong thing, or I credited them, without getting authorization. I go, look, I'm going to credit that for you. You don't have to cover that. So I'm asking myself on the way, like, what have I done to get fired? I'm about to get fired just because I heard that in his voice. So when I sat in the office, The first thing, and he added to those fears because when I sat down in his office, first thing he asked me is, how did I get there? He goes, how did you get to work today? I said, I drove. He's like, okay. And so I'm like, oh, I'm gone. And he says, he goes, your wife has your other car? He goes, I said, yes. He said, okay. He goes, I got some really bad news for you. And I'm still thinking I'm going to be fired. Because the reason I keep saying that is because when he told me something happened, that my wife was in an accident, right? I remember having a moment of relief, right? Before I'm like, okay, did she call? Let me call her and see if she's okay. And he's like, no, she's not okay, is what he told me. And this is when the relief that I was feeling from not being fired, and maybe my wife was just in a car accident, to the horrible grief of something's definitely wrong. And that's when he told me that she was dead. And I remember thinking, like, oh my God, I have to raise my son by myself. So he took me to the scene. He said, listen, we're both gonna go. I'm gonna take you where she is. Leave your car here because I don't know if you're in any condition to drive. He's the one that took me to the scene. On the way to the scene is when he told me that my son was also dead. And that's when the grief and despair overtook me, and it became something that I couldn't even comprehend or fathom. The car wreck, my son who was in the back seat was thrown through the windshield of the car, and my wife cracked her skull on the windshield that broke the glass. It was horrendous. Luckily, when I got there, all the bodies were leaving the scene. It was a horrible scene. The car was wrecked beyond belief. Now, rather than spend a lot of time with the graphic details of all that and flashing it back in my mind, I will tell you that devastated me. And Jackie's mom, who helped me with the funeral, helped me put everything together, picked up some of her things from the house, and we talked every once in a while for about a year. At some point in time, just cut off communication with me completely. Like, we would talk, used to be we talk about 3 or 4 times a week, then we talk maybe twice a week, then we talk maybe twice a month. After a while, she just stopped calling. And as a matter of fact, when I called, she wouldn't answer. And at some point I tried to call and her number had changed. And when I went by where she lived, she wasn't there. So friends told me that I probably just reminded her that her daughter was gone, her daughter and grandson, that there was actually probably no need to connect with me at that time. That devastated me. I'm going to say it took probably, remembering all the grief that I went through, the fact at the beginning I could barely even talk about it. For about 2 weeks, I was unfunctionable as a human being. I stayed home, cried constantly. And months after that, like, bringing it up would just completely keep me still, sitting and quiet. I couldn't even process it. And I'd say it's only after 2 years that I was able to discuss it without having to go off by myself. Now I can talk about it. It gives me a heavy heart, but it still very much hurts. But losing her wasn't just losing that significant person that had been with me for 5 years. I lost that financial help that was helping me pay for the 2-bedroom apartment that we were staying in, make the payments on my car, so I began to financially struggle. And it didn't take long for it to happen. Neither one of us had insurance or life insurance or anything. We were a struggling, just married couple with kids. And so all that burden kind of fell on me. Thank God for my mom and my dad and my family who've always been supportive of me, that they were there to help support me through all that. And I want to thank you guys for tuning in and listening to me express that. Probably not as smoothly as I would like to have discussed it, but I appreciate you guys, listening to that story. I'm going to be posting more, putting up more videos. So do me a favor, like I said, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, because now I'm going to respond to the comments. And thank you guys for your support of my channel. Thanks.